Hello, my name is Kai, and welcome back to Extra Time, the series where I read your comments, answer your questions, and make clarifications wherever I need to. There's been a lot of transfer talk recently, so this video is going to serve as a spiritual successor to my Actually Sensible Transfers Liverpool video. Now before I get into it, it'd be great if you guys could like the video, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on Twitter. I also currently have a poll in my community tab for when I'm making content on other teams if I should make a separate channel or post that on this channel. I expect to have my first video done on another team within the next 5 days, and if you have a team that you support that's not Liverpool and you'd like me to make a video on it, please let me know down in the comments below. But anyway, let's get right into Extra Time. So I got a decent amount of comments on the center back situation on who we should sign, and these comments talk about Lukeba, Zabarni, Leone, Collins, and Bisek. So let's actually look at the data behind these players. So Castello Lukeba is a center back who was signed from Lyon to RB Leipzig and plays for them for the most part every single week. Now the thing with Castello Lukeba is he gets slated a lot because a lot of people don't see him as a good defender. I don't really see him as a good center back. I think ideally he's a Jarell Hatto style of left back. You kind of put him there to lock down the position, the left back equivalent of someone like Jules Koundé. As you can see from his statistics, he makes a lot of errors. He doesn't win a lot of aerials because he's only about 6 feet tall, but he has great progressive passing stats. He's a great carrier of the ball. If you watch him play, you can tell that he kind of gets stuck in and tries to progress the ball. It's just that he's not really a center back, so he makes a lot of errors that you wouldn't really expect from a center back playing for a team as good as RB Leipzig. Now, if I had somebody like Castello Lukeba, I would play him at left back here so that you could form a back three in possession. Now, I think a lot of people are suggesting him as center back cover, but he's nowhere close to being as good as Van Dijk, and he's a fundamentally different player. And unlike someone like Mark Gahey, he doesn't read the game well enough as a center back to play him despite his height. So for me, I would not sign someone like Castello Lukeba for Liverpool. It would have been a good option if we wanted a defensive left back to make the back three, but I think we're doing that with Gravenberch sort of dropping it instead. So let's take a look at Bournemouth's Ilya Zabarni. Now I didn't talk about him in my Sensible Transfers video purely because I thought he was going to sign for PSG, but since that's looking very unlikely now, let's talk about Ilya Zabarni. Zabarni is very similar to Ibu. He's not an elite passer of the ball. He's actually much better at carrying. Not as good as someone like Joel Matip, but a good carrier of the ball. He's very physical. I believe he's 6'2". He wins a lot of his aerials. Again, not as much as somebody like Ibu and not in like an elite bracket, but he could definitely develop that part of his game. He reads the game well, and he was Bournemouth's best defender last season because Kirkes is a raw defender, not elite yet positionally, and Dean Housen was mostly used for progression more so than his defensive ability. Zabarni was the true defender in that team, and he was good. And I think that if we were to lose Ibu, he would be a great option for the team and would effectively play like Ibu did for us. And there's no point at looking at how Zabarni would play on the pitch. It would be identical to how you've seen Konate play. So we've been linked a lot with Giovanni Leone. Now I'll be honest, I've only watched Leone play about twice prior to the links. Since then, I've watched a couple more of his matches because of the links. And what I like to say about Leone is there's a lot of things I like about him. His height's great, but despite his height, he doesn't win a massive amount of aerial duels. You can see here it's about 63%. He's not an elite progressive passer, although I do see him developing a pretty good long passing game. Of course, he's 18, and I believe he's been playing since he was 16 as a center back. So you have to take that with a grain of salt with young defenders that they're going to develop. But I do like how stuck in he gets, and I also like that he doesn't really go to ground a lot, which you see from a lot of young defenders, but he's also not like nonchalant. He's not fully like Verge where he kind of parries away and then tackles at the right time. He sort of is just a very good tackler when he's on his feet. Those are certain little attributes that I really like seeing in young defenders. So I could completely understand why we would go for someone like him, but I don't know if it's really going to materialize because when I used to watch him at Parma in those 2 games, to me he kind of feels like a Serie A lifer, but if he does want to come to the Prem, I would 100% be okay with it. And if you saw some of his photos, he looks like a Scouser, you know, he looks like one of the least Italian people of all time. As for where he would play, if I had somebody like Leone, You could play him in Van Dijk's position long term, but I think short term he'd be in Ibu's position because we're not really going to rotate Van Dijk. And if we were to sign someone like Mark Gahey, he'd be second choice to Van Dijk. So I think short term he's here, long term he's in Van Dijk's position. And for Parma, he sort of plays as a central center back because they played with a back three under Chivu. So another one of the options that was listed in those comments was Nathan Collins. I've read it a lot on Twitter too. A lot of people love Nathan Collins. He's homegrown. He's a very physical defender. He wins a lot of aerials, gets stuck in, blocks a lot. He's very good in set plays. There's a lot of things that you would like about Nathan Collins. My problem with him is that you can't have him as a center back for Liverpool. He's simply too slow. He would not be able to cover the space. Like, it wouldn't make sense because we would only really be able to play him against weaker opposition because we always play a high line, but against weaker opposition, it's more likely that he would be able to defend against some players. But even then, weaker oppositions always have a fast winger and he'll get destroyed. It just doesn't make sense for how high we play. It would maybe make sense for Tottenham to go and sign him because I don't imagine Thomas Frank playing that high of a line at Spurs. I expect him to just play a better version of his Bournemouth game. But yeah, I wouldn't even consider Nathan Collins, but I do think he's an incredible defender, but just not in a team that plays with a high line. Okay, so now we move on to Inter's Jan Bissek. I really like Jan Bissek. He's in this list of Serie A center backs that I really enjoyed and I've been watching for a while because of how young they moved there. He's very tall, wins a lot of aerial duels. He's very good at turning a man and carrying the ball forward. Yeah, he's good forward. He's good at these aerial duels. I think his ground dueling is not incredible. I think he makes a decent amount of errors and mistakes. He's not really a defender that you signed to be an out-and-out defender. He just sort of covers space well. He's kind of a rough approximation of Ibu, but he doesn't really have Ibu's like ground tenacity and strength. So because of that, I don't really think it makes sense for Liverpool, but I think for any team that's playing a back three, i.e. like Man United or Crystal Palace, he'd be great there. I think they should go for a player like this. As for where Bissek would play for us, I think he could just only play in the Konate role because realistically for the Van Dijk role, you want someone who's a better passer to be his backup. That's essentially the only place you could play him is here, and if Konate leaves, I don't know if I'd be comfortable with Bissek as the starter, and I'm not really comfortable with Mark Gahey as the starter either, so that could be a problem. It's probably why I'd go with Zabarni actually. Zabarni, if Konate leaves, is actually my sensible pick there now. So that's just an FYI. So the next section of comments I have is a bunch of different striker suggestions. So people were suggesting Luis Javier Suarez from Almeria, Ollie Watkins, Sergio Guirassy, Dusan Vlahovic, Nick Voltemade, Amin Giri, Lucas Dawson, Franjo Ivanovic, Gonzalo Ramos, Ademola Lookman, Samu Omorodion, and Randall Colomwani. I'm also going to talk about John Philippe Mateta. Let's start by talking about Luis Javier Suarez. So he plays for Almeria. I've watched him play both this season and last season. I watched him play last season live, like on the TV. This season, I watched a lot of his footage after the fact once I was hearing his name being thrown around again. The thing I like about Luis Javier Suarez, and these statistics right now are actually from his 23-24 La Liga season, is I think he's a really good finisher. I think he carries the ball well. And I think that he's a very unorthodox finisher. He finishes the ball in all sorts of different ways, and I feel like he catches the defenders and goalkeepers off guard constantly with his style of finishing. I don't think he makes any sense for Liverpool based on how we're going to play, but I do actually like the idea of him going to Man U because I think he would actually really suit Ruben Amorim's team. I think he is someone that they should go for, and I did understand the links to Man U, and I thought it would be a good signing because he wouldn't be that expensive. But for Liverpool, he doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, and I'm not really even going to show what he would do on the pitch because I just don't think it would be a logical transfer. Now, Ollie Watkins I don't think makes sense either. He's too old now. I think there's a couple of things that he does well. Ollie Watkins is a great carrier, we know this. He's a decent passer of the ball. He can generate a good amount of goals and assists. His hold-up play is pretty good. He can run in behind. He can do a lot of different attributes, and if this was Ollie Watkins about 3 years ago, I would actually listen to the shout. But right now, Ollie Watkins, in my opinion, is showing clear signs of decline. Very, very clear signs of decline. When you watch Ollie Watkins play, and the more and more that I'm watching him, he's looking a little bit slower. His decision making is getting a little bit worse. His physicality is looking just a little bit worse. It's not enough to be massively noticeable, but I wouldn't be surprised if next season is his last season of true production in the Premier League, which is why I think it would make sense for him to try to go and leave Villa to somewhere like Man U and get a big contract because he's definitely going to decline now. But I wouldn't be against an Ollie Watkins type profile in the team. Because if you take Diaz out and you put Watkins in here, Watkins can be in the final third and hold up play and pass it. He can run the channels for you. He can do deep progressions. I wouldn't mind a player who has his profile. He's not the best finisher, but someone who can do a lot of the other roles on the pitch does make sense to me. And it's actually why I would advocate for another Villa player in Morgan Rogers or someone else of that ilk who can do hold up play very well and is aggressive and is a robust ball carrier, because that gets us closer to playing similarly to PSG in terms of fluidity and would be very difficult to mark. So I do get where the idea for Watkins comes from. So I actually follow Dortmund very, very closely. I love watching Dortmund play. I love Serhou Guirassy. I think he's an incredible player. I think he's an elite finisher, very physical, incredible hold-up play, carries the ball well for his height. Not a great carrier, but I think for his height. I think the only players you see who have even better carrying for their height is like Voltemade, who we'll talk about later. But he's an elite finisher. He'd be great. I think the problem with him is the age timeline. He's 29. You could maybe sign him as a stopgap, but I think he would just cost too much money. Dortmund always overcharge for every player that they sell, so I just don't think it makes sense. Maybe for Palace, if they lose Mateta, they should go for Guirassy, but even then, just doesn't make a whole lot of sense, the timeline. But if we were to go on the pitch, he would hold up play very well and he would finish very well. He would be able to knock in those crosses from outside the box. He'd be good, but no, the age timeline doesn't really make sense. Next up to bat, we have Dusan Vlahovic. Now, I really liked Vlahovic when he was at Fiorentina. I thought he was actually really good early on for Juve. I thought he was a good player. I think Dusan Vlahovic is a good finisher. I thought he was a good finisher. I think that whoever picks up Vlahovic this summer, assuming it's a team that has a good environment, like I think for Man U, he would probably flop again. But if he was to go into a team with a good environment, I think he would actually perform pretty well. I think he still has the fundamentals that would make him a good player. Because when I watch Vlahovic play, like he can get into good positions where he can push against his center back, get through and slot it with his favored left foot. He can hold up the ball well. He was very robust. He hits the ball very hard. He was a good finisher at Fiorentina, and he was a great hold-up player, and he could pass decently well. I think that for a team like Liverpool, it doesn't make sense, mainly because I think we need someone who's in a higher bracket. But if you put him in a settled environment that hasn't had a massive amount of change or upheaval, I think you could get more out of Vlahovic. I think Juve are a poorly run club. You see the players they've sold over the years, like Enzo Berenchea, Dean Housen, Coney de Winter. You can tell that the club isn't run well, and you can also see some interesting decision making when you try to replace Dusan Vlahovic with Randall Kolo Muani. Now, I quite love Nick Voltemade. I think he's incredible. For his size, he's an incredible dribbler and a passer. He is an elite false nine. He's very good. His finishing isn't the best. I think that's his one downside. I'm not a big fan of how he finishes. I don't think he strikes the ball particularly hard either. I don't think he defends well or contests enough headers for his height, because I believe he's like 6'5". But I think if you were to run a front two with someone like Voltemade and Ekitike, or Voltemade and Isak, aka I think that Newcastle should sign him. It would be great. I think he'd be great. Or in a team where he can be the false nine surrounded by two fast wingers, I think he'd be great. For Liverpool though, I just don't think it makes sense. We could take him as a backup striker, but I think he would want to be more than just a backup striker. But again, I mean, if you were to have someone like Voltemade in your team, benefit is that he can carry the ball and he can sort of drop deep and let someone like Szoboszlai run behind, or Salah cut inside, or Frimpong go through. Wirtz can come in. He gives you a lot of that kind of versatility and that structure in midfield because he's going to drop in, but I think there are more versatile options who can do this, and they're not just limited to it like I think Voltemade would be, at least in the Prem. Look, back when Amin Giri was at Rennes, I thought he was incredible. And also, I remember the photo of him between Kefren Turam and Kouadio Manukone, and I thought he was a great player back then. I still think he's a good player now. He's another player who would effectively be a false nine for us. I think at best, though, he's a backup. He looks like he has good statistics. I think a lot of the things that he does would scale in the Prem. His passing and carrying, I think, scales in the Prem and in a possession team. I don't don't think with the types of goals that he scores that he would score a lot of goals in the Prem. He's a very high volume shooter, which is things you look for, you know, it's like something that Semenyo is good at in the Prem, but he doesn't score a lot of goals. He gets a lot of shots on target that I personally think aren't particularly good, but I will say that he's a good all-around player, and he would be a better pick, I think, for Liverpool as a backup than Voltemade, because I just think that Geary offers more, but I still probably wouldn't think it's particularly sensible, and he's only really just moved to Marseille. No to Gonzalo Ramos. I don't really want to entertain this. His statistics look way better than they are because he plays in that PSG team. I think he's a terrible finisher. I think he's a very busy player. He does a lot. He'll take a lot of shots. He kind of reminds me of Darwin, and he was Darwin's replacement at Benfica, but no, there's just no world where you sign him. He would cost too much money. It would be similar to Darwin, if not worse. No, absolutely not. As a backup, maybe, but definitely not as your starter. I really like Lucas Stassen. That Saint-Etienne team in general were incredible. It was surprising that they went down, but Stassen's a good player. I like that he reads the game well enough to run in behind. When I watched him at Westerlo, I thought he was a very good player too. He gets on the end of a lot of passes. He always seems to meet the ball when it either goes in behind or goes over the top. He also seems to be able to get good separation from players. He takes a lot of good shots. He has a pretty good shot map. I think the problem is that he doesn't shoot enough, but part of that's because of how that Saint-Etienne team played. He's definitely a player who would scale in possession. He's a very good finisher, I think, for his age and how many limited shots he takes. People point out that he's often offside, but he basically had to play on the last line in that Saint-Etienne team all the time because they would try to go very direct. I think he definitely scales in a better team, and he'd be great as a backup striker, and I don't think he would cost you more than 20 mil. So I would 100% go for Lucas Stassen. Also, what Stassen offers you is, if you were to have signed, I don't know, you wanted to sign some kind of false nine prospect, right? And you wanted that false nine to be your starter, right? So let's say I have Diaz here, who's the false nine. Stassen's a pretty good option as an off the bench, like orthodox number 9 that you can bring in who's just going to run the channels. And in a team like Liverpool, where you have Florian Wirtz and Mo Salah who are passing, they'll find him and he'll probably score a decent amount of goals for his value. So I would definitely be in favor of signing him as a backup. Could he ever develop into a first choice or like a world-class striker? Difficult to tell because of how young he is, but I do think he has a lot of really good physical attributes and he's a pretty smart player. Franjo Ivanovic, I need to see more of him. I've seen very limited amounts of him. I've only really seen 2 USG games, and both of the times I was watching USG not for him but for Siddiqui. But what I will say is Franjo, he likes to pick up the ball in the wings and very deep. I don't really think he would suit how we're going to play, at least with our striker, because he's not really a false 9. He kind of just likes to dribble from deep. But again, this is a player that I would look at if I'm a Crystal Palace, if I'm a Man U, for either the striker position or one of the 10 positions, because I don't think he would be that expensive. He's excellent at pressing. He's very, very, very good at pressing. He beats a lot of people deep. He's a great passer. He's a great carrier. I don't think he's a great finisher, but a lot of the attributes that he gives you, I think he could develop into a better player than someone like Joshua Zirkzee, who plays the same role. For a team like that, I would definitely consider someone like Franjo. And also, I don't know if I'm saying his name correctly, but I'm doing my best. I'm going to start by saying no to Ademola Lookman, although I think he's really good. I think Lookman's way better off the left than he is centrally, and if you want Lookman as your left winger, I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense with Kirkez there. Again, there's a way to do it. Again, the Barisic Tavernier role, there's a possibility to make it work, but I think with the age that Lookman's at, there are different and better players that you can probably get for that position. It doesn't really make sense as a striker, even as a false 9. He doesn't link up play very well. He kind of just likes to pick up the ball and drive and run at people. He just carries. A lot of his shots are great, but he's not particularly consistent. At least in my opinion, he's not a consistent goal scorer. Yeah, I would say no to Ademola Lookman, and I think he would be way too expensive. Atalanta like to fleece teams for strikers. Look at how they fleeced Man U when they sold them Højlund. Just wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for us to be in for him. I've recently been looking at and hearing links to Samu Amorodian. Now the thing is, so Atletico sold him. Initially they were going to sell him to Chelsea, and that fell through. They ended up selling selling him to Porto, and Porto just bought the full rights to own him, so there's no longer a sell-on clause that they'll have. I think Samu will be the starting striker for Spain within about 5 years. I think right now he's really raw. I think he is a decent finisher. I think he's very physical. I see a possibility of him being a great Prem striker, but for where he's at right now, no. He makes way too many mistakes, way too many misses, doesn't link up play well enough. He's very one trick. He basically needs to hang in the box to do anything. He's not a good enough player at all right now. He needs a lot of time to just develop in a league where there's no pressure, which is a good situation for where he's in Porto. So I would just keep watching his development and maybe move for him in a few years if we even need a striker by then. Another one people are talking about is Kolo Muani, who I think has signed for Juve now or is going to sign for Juve. It doesn't make any sense to me. Kolo Muani's a terrible finisher. He's fast. He's a good dribbler, but he's a terrible finisher. I think if he was really low cost, he'd be a great backup, but it makes no sense. I think he does a worse job of what Darwin does, where he's a bit of a chance magnet, but nowhere close to as much as Darwin is. So it doesn't really make sense to have him or even attempt to buy him. So no to Rando Kolo Muani. Last person I want to talk about is Jean-Philippe Mateta. So Mateta can't be your starting striker. If you want to sign somebody like Rodgers or Rodrigo to be your false nine and have him as the backup striker, perfect. I would do that. He's a Liverpool fan. Mateta holds up the ball well. He plays in a Palace team that relies a lot on counterattacking, and I do think he scales in possession massively. I don't think his goal scoring scales that much in possession, but I think his overall game does, because his hold up is very effective. His passing is pretty good. His carrying is pretty good. I think he has a low volume of passes, progressive passes and carries because of that Palace team. He has to be very one-touch and defer responsibility to Eberiche Eze and Ismail Assar and even Adam Morton. But yeah, for what his hold up is, he's good in the air. He'd get a lot of crosses from our fullbacks and our wingers. Yeah, I think he would be a good fit for this team. And if he was under 40 million, I would definitely go for him as a backup striker. But I would still be looking for a first choice number 9 or false 9 if I was to sign somebody like Jean-Philippe Mateta. So people were talking about some attacking midfielders. We have Orhan Sanset, Mateus Fernandez, and Jacob Ramsey. A comment about, me talking about how much I love Morgan Rogers. So let's get into it. I don't think Sanset is ever going to leave Athletic Club. He looks like an Athletic Club lifer to me. But what I will say is he's very robust for a Spanish midfielder. He's elite technically. He's a great box crasher, great at shooting, very physical. Yeah, great passer. He's a pass-first attacking midfielder. If you've seen some of the plays that he's made for that team, it's incredible. And I think if this Athletic Club team can develop, he's definitely going to be the main conductor in that midfield. So I'm a big fan of Sanse. I don't ever see him leaving Athletic Club. And if he was to play, I think he would probably play in Sabo's role, but I think Sabo's a better presser than him. So I don't know if it's a true upgrade, but he'd be a good profile. And he's also much more suited to a false 9 as well than someone like Sabo or even Wirtz. Now, Mateus Fernandez, I like him. He'd be a good 10. He could play left wing for Liverpool too, and maybe even right wing at a push. He's an elite presser of the ball. I think he's incredible. He would fit the team well, but I think Southampton will keep him, and I think they'll want like some insane kind of money, like 40 or 50 million. So I probably wouldn't bite either. Jacob Ramsey could play across the 3 behind the striker. He could play left wing as the 10 or on the right. He'd be great. I really like his carrying style. I think he's a really good finisher. I think he's a very unorthodox finisher. I think he's a decent dribbler. If he was cheap, I would say go for him because he's also homegrown. But realistically, I don't see a world where Liverpool actually move for someone like Jacob Ramsey, but I could see exactly where he would play in this team, and he'd be a great backup option. But again, not a starter, so he would have to be cheap to justify that. So now we go into straight up midfielders, people for the pivot. We got Yashari, Hackney, Ederson, which is the Ederson from Atalanta, Elliot Anderson, and Frankie de Jong, which was a crazy shout in my opinion. Ardan Yashari. So there's a lot of things I really like about Yashari. I think he's a great passer of the ball, and I think he's very physical. Those are two good things. I think he could play as a 6 or an 8 for Liverpool. I think he would almost be perfect for that Rovella role if that's what we wanted to do. In fact, let's go ahead and bring out Ardan Yashari right now. So let's bring him in. What Yashari is going to do is he could easily do this role of picking up the ball. He did this at times from Club Brugge. Of of course, it's not the thing that he's the best at, but he can do it. He's good at immediately progressing the ball forward, kind of like a poor man's Stiller or a poor man's Zubamendi or Wharton. He can do that role very well as the 6 or as the 8. You can put him further forward and he can pass. He's really good at doing incisive passes to wingers by cutting through the opposition. Like if he's here, there's a player here and a winger here, he is pretty decent at threading this ball through. So I wouldn't be opposed to signing Yashari. The reason I didn't mention him in my sensible transfers video is the same reason I didn't mention Rishi. I thought they were both just gonna go to AC Milan. That's what the reports looked like. But now that it's a bit more in limbo, I wouldn't hate us going for someone like Yashari. He would definitely be a good option for the pivot, and Slot would probably like him. I'm gonna say no to Hayden Hackney. I think he's a great player. I think Man U or Palace should go for him. Good pivot player, can play as an 8 at a high level, but realistically he would be 4th or 5th choice in the pivot, and I'd rather just develop someone like Trey Nyoni or James McConnell if we're gonna do that. Now for Ederson, I think when I initially looked at him last season, 2 seasons ago, he was a 6 who was effectively playing as an 8 because Darun was an 8 effectively playing as a 6, mainly because Darun had lost his pace. Ederson could run around. It was a weird situation at Atalanta. And what I saw from him is he was good at shooting. He could carry the ball. He was quick, covered a lot of space, but I thought he was a terrible passer. This season when I watched him, I think his passing game's improved. I don't think it's improved enough to be like a reliable slot midfielder, but I think it's improved enough where you could find a way to play him, especially next to McAllister. I think that would be a decent fit. Now, he's not like the most destructive 6. He sort of just covers ground and attempts blocks and interceptions as opposed to going to ground and tackling somebody or running through and fucking smacking the ball away. He doesn't really do that. But I could see a world where he could be a 6 or an 8 for Liverpool. Again, more likely to probably be a 6, but I could see a world where he also plays as an 8. Like he could easily be here and here. Now, the thing is, the reason I didn't suggest him in my sensible transfers video is because I don't think he can do this. I don't think he can receive the ball from the center backs, which is important because if he can't do it, that means McAllister's got to do it. And yes, he can do this progressive shtick, but it just seems too ass backwards for me, and because of that I might not sign him. But I do like him as a player, and I think he'd be much more suited for a team like Newcastle or even Man U. It would be a good pickup if those types of teams could get him. Elliot Anderson would simply be too expensive. He just signed for Forest last season and he's English, so there's just no shot. He's a good player. He could play as an 8 for us. He could never play as a 6 for us. I don't think he does enough progressive actions to justify being in the team at all, but I think he's a good defender. And that's about it for Elliot. I think he's also a decent shot maker too, but he's not really good at the whole progressing aspect of the game, which is essential for a slot midfield. So no to Elliot Anderson. Frankie de Jong is an obvious no because he's too old and he's injury prone, but he's one of the best progressive passers in Europe. He's a great carrier of the ball. He's elite at it. He's a good defender, great positional defender. You could play him as a 6 or an 8. Obviously, he's more of a deep 8 than a 6, but you could play him as a 6. Slot would obviously love him, but he's too expensive. He's in the Joshua Kimmich position of like a good player who'd fit in the midfield, but it just doesn't make any sense timeline wise. But great player and good on Barca, even though he's always injured. So the last bit of transfer suggestions were people who I'd effectively think would play on the wings. We have Eze, Adeyemi, Akliouche, and Dan Ndoye. Eze would be incredible for Liverpool. Just absolutely incredible. It would be a genius transfer if we could get it. Of course, the age doesn't make any sense, but Eze could play on the left or central. He could play either of these two positions. He's a great dribbler, great passer. He's a great finisher. We know Eze. We watch him week in, week out in the Prem. In terms of his age, he's only been really playing senior football at a high level since he was about 20 years old. So because of that, he's probably going to play easily until he's about 33. But right now he's linked with Arsenal. I don't know if he'll end up leaving Palace, but I think purely because of the age, we probably don't move for him. And he might also be very expensive too. And Palace are rough negotiators, so I don't know if that's a move that we'd really want to make. You know, I remember Karim Adeyemi at Salzburg, and I thought he could be a Salah successor. Rapid, good finisher. He looked like an intelligent player, and his development has fully stalled at Dortmund. He's basically can only play as a left winger who beats his man on the outside and then does nothing and fails to score. Yeah, it sucks. I don't think we should move for him. He'd be too expensive anyway. Yeah, it's tragic what's happened to Kareem. I thought he was going to be so much better of a player than he ended up being, but that's just how it goes. Akliouche be a good signing. I think a lot of the people at Monaco, like him, even Ben Seguir, would be good signings. Both of those players have very good all-around stats. They're good at progressing the ball forward and carrying. Akliouche is a great finisher. He's got a bit of finesse on him. Great presser. He's left-footed. He could play in Mo Salah's position. He could play as the 10. You could even play him left wing or as a false 9. Very versatile. He's a bit older. I think he's 23, maybe 24 now. I don't know when his birthday is. And last time I checked was like 3 or 4 months ago as to how old he was. But yeah, when I watch him play for Monaco, yeah, he'd be a good player. He'd fit well in a slot team. I don't think he would score a lot of goals, but I think he would create a lot of chances. So if we had an elite number 9 or a good finisher at the 9, yeah, he would make a lot of sense. Don't think he would be too expensive either. Pretty sensible pick if we want a backup for Mo. And the last thing is Dan Ndoye, who I'm just going to say no to. Ndoye basically is a ball carrier who runs really fast on the left wing or on the right. And no, that's all he does. He wouldn't make any sense in a slot team. Newcastle, if they want someone to replace Gordon, tap him up. I think he's a good player. But even then, for Newcastle, I'd probably recommend Schade over Dan Ndoye. But he's a good player. It just doesn't make any sense for a slot team at all. He's just a running behind winger. Yeah, that was a lot of different transfers, but I went over all of the comments and I really thought about it and tried to present my opinions the best that I could. But now someone's asking for my take on Curtis Jones. I think Curtis Jones is our third choice midfielder in the pivot. Realistically, I think he should be fourth choice and we should sign somebody. The thing with Curtis is, if he ever reached his potential, he would be an elite, maybe potentially world-class controller in the midfield. Great short passer. He's very intelligent, picks up good positions, but he's so inconsistent. Sometimes he hangs onto the ball too long. Sometimes he back passes when he shouldn't. Sometimes he doesn't turn a man or dribble forward when he should. He's too risk averse, and he's also too slow on the ball. There are times where you see him play and you're like, damn, why doesn't he do this all the time? And I think consistency is just always going to be his killer. But you keep him in the squad. You never sell him. You'd never get a player as good as Curtis Jones willing to be fourth choice in a pivot. Because of that, you definitely keep him. We'll see if he ever develops into an elite controller in midfield. He's like a metronome. So people were talking about, when I was saying if Liverpool need a striker in that video, that I wasn't talking about Gakpo. Gakpo does suit the role. He does suit the role. But the issue is that Cody Gakpo is never going to be world class. He's a very, very poor man's version of Arjen Robben. He cuts inside and he has the inevitable shot that he does. Good technique on his shots. He arrives at the back post very well. Intelligent footballer, but Gakpo's never really going to beat a man on the outside. Gakpo's never going to really be an elite passer or crosser. Never going to be an elite dribbler. He can just do the role. And because of that, he should be your backup in the role. But he's not your starter. That's why I didn't talk about him, because I was looking for people who would be starters. Like right now, he's the backup because Florian Wirtz would be on the left wing and he would. But if Florian Wirtz was in the false 9, we could live with Gakpo on the wing for a year, but realistically, you're still looking to replace him at every opportunity. What is the backstory to me supporting Liverpool? I'll give you the short version, maybe I'll give you the long version later, but when I was a kid, my grandfather was a Man U fan, and in America, there weren't a lot of soccer fans at the time, and my grandfather didn't really know a lot of people who watched it, and because of that, I asked him when I was a kid who Man U's biggest rivals were, and he said Liverpool, and then I said, okay, I'll support them then, and he thought that was really funny. But because of that, when I was young, I used to watch a lot of old Man U footage. My grandfather used to show me people like Pallister and Bruce, and yeah, I watched all of those players. A lot of older teams in general, actually. My grandfather even showed me some of the old Liverpool teams, and yeah, that's basically my backstory. And I think when Liverpool signed Luis Suarez, that's when I went from being like a casual Liverpool fan to be really getting invested in the sport, because I thought Luis Suarez was the best footballer I'd ever seen. I thought he was incredible. So that's effectively my story for why I support Liverpool. Could you do a realistic squad? No, I'm not really going to do a realistic squad for all the homegrown places were filled, because I don't really like to speculate. And for the next question where it says we could use academy players to fill in the homegrown spots, I mean, we can. We did this with Paul Glatzel. We could do this with one of them. I don't think it really matters if we do or we don't, to be honest. We have a good enough academy now too that we can just promote players like Rio if we want, or TKD whenever we need them if there are injuries. And finally, could Wirtz play the double pivot with Szoboszlai? No, you don't want Wirtz in a double pivot. Could you play them in a diamond? I've thought about this actually, so I actually want to go to the pitch. A diamond would kind of be fun. It makes a lot of sense in terms of build up. The issue you're going to have is it makes absolutely no sense for Gravenberch to be here. You need, at the base of a diamond, you either need both of these players to be grafters, and we know McAllister isn't, or you need this guy to be elite. As a 6, you would at least need someone as good as Wharton. So for me, you can't have Grav play this role at all. And the other problem you're going to have is this striker profile needs to be a good channel runner. So like Isak, Ekatike, Gyökeres. You can't really put a false 9 here. And because Mo is going to drift, so you need a guy who can just run into channels. But I mean, you could do it. I wouldn't be opposed. It'd be fun, but I don't think it's the best use of the players that we have. Yeah, that's the end of the video. If you liked the video, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, follow me on Twitter, and if you want to be featured in an Extra Time next week, just comment on this video or any other video, some questions or clarifications that you want from me, and that's it from me. And as always, thanks for watching.